Hi there. We're back today to answer the question of what is homeschooling and what isn't it. There are a lot of misconceptions about homeschooling and what it really looks like. Just this week, through like swimming lessons and people at the grocery store, I've had conversations with people who really don't understand what homeschooling looks like and what it is. So I want to share with you, I've been homeschooling for 15 years. I have 5 children, and so I grew up going to public school, and so I know what public schools look like. My husband went to private schools, and so we have kind of a good understanding of how that works. So first off, let's talk about what homeschooling isn't. A lot of people think homeschool, and they kind of reverse that and think, oh, it's school at home. And they have these images of standing up in front of their child sitting at a desk, and them standing in front, and maybe there's an American flag somewhere, and they say the Pledge of Allegiance and do, some kind of lecture. That is not what homeschooling looks like at all. Another myth that people have about homeschooling, or misconception, is they think I have to stand up in front of my child and teach them for 6 hours a day. And they think, how am I ever going to do that? How am I going to fill that time? How am I going to get anything else done? And how does this all work? So that homeschooling is not teaching 6 hours a day. Another thing is homeschooling is not a rigid schedule with the bell ringing at 8 o'clock every morning, and that you have to have your child sitting at that desk where you're going to lecture for 6 hours. It's not that. So let me tell you what homeschooling is, because homeschooling, at least the way we do it and how I hear a lot of other families do it, is just so much better than that. And it's really a completely different way of thinking about educating your child. And I think it's just a lot more enjoyable. So homeschooling, for one, does not take place with your child sitting at a desk. Now, it's okay for them to have a desk. It's okay for them to do some things at a desk. But when you're at home, you have your whole house, and if you have a yard, you have that at your disposal. And so a typical morning for us, we would do some phonics sitting at the kitchen table, followed by some handwriting. And when we do math, we frequently will do it on the floor in the living room to give us more space, and we'll utilize our coffee table if we need to write something down or do some little activity. When we read science or history or just a read aloud, we'll do that on the living room couch. Or maybe if it's a nice day, we'll read out on a blanket out on the grass, or sit on a glider bench outside and really enjoy the space around us. If it's a beautiful day, that's the time to sit outside. If it's a rainy or snowy day where you live, that's a great time to read in front of the fire along with a cup of hot chocolate. And those are really fun ways to do homeschooling, but they're also very beneficial, because when you're sitting snuggled up on the couch, I sit on this couch a lot, and I have kids on either side of me, and just have them nearby, we can talk better, we can have good conversations about what we're reading about, or if we're outside reading science, then laying on the grass. We can also look at the whatever wildlife is around. For us, that's mostly birds and probably lizards, most likely, around where we live. But they're just great. We can look at the clouds and talk about those. We can just, if the moon is up during the day, we can talk about that and the phases of the moon. All kinds of things. You can just make those things, just more enjoyable by being able to move around. Some kids have a hard time focusing, just being in one place. And so by moving around, maybe even for every subject or every 2 subjects, you keep your child's interest. And if you have a little bit of ADD or ADHD, moving around a little bit is good for you too, and having that change of scenery. So the next thing, homeschooling is not teaching or lecturing to your child 6 hours a day. Now, when you think about days in public school, you arrive at school, you wait in line, you walk into class. It takes a few minutes for everyone to put their book bags away and their lunches away, and then they sit down and you take attendance, and there's maybe collecting lunch money. There are general announcements. Then you might 15-20 minutes in, you might get around to your first subject. Then you have recess breaks, you have lunch breaks, you have times that you're waiting for teams to be picked, for papers to be collected or passed out. You have time where teachers are correcting someone for misbehaving, or maybe teachers are just helping a student who's struggling. So when you subtract off all of those things that occupy a school day, changing classrooms, that's another thing. When you take away all those things and start with your 6 hours and start cutting all those things off, you actually end up with an average of 100 minutes a day for actual teaching time. Maybe for some teachers it's a little bit more, maybe some teachers it's a little bit less. But they're doing an average of 100 minutes a day of actual lecturing and giving instructions to your child at a 1 to, how many kids are in your child's class? 1 to 20 ratio, 1 to 30, maybe 1 to 35 in some classes. So even though your child is getting that instruction, they're not getting it personally, and they're not going to be able to answer or ask all the questions they want. It's just different than when you're homeschooling and you have that child one-on-one, or if you have more than one child, maybe 1 to 2 or 3. So you can have a lot more lively discussions and more question and answer going back and forth when you only have one child. The other thing is that when you are teaching just your child, you're going to know pretty quick if your child gets it or not. And if they understand it, then great, you can just move ahead and move on to the next lesson. If you're teaching your child and they're not really getting it, then you're like, oh, well, they're not really understanding this. I'm going to teach this lesson again tomorrow, or try to teach it in a different way tomorrow. So you know where your child is at. So you can tailor your teaching better. You can answer their specific questions. They can ask as many questions as they need to understand the material, which that's why we educate our children, to understand the material. We're not teaching to a test. We're just trying to teach how or what they need to know in reading, writing, math, science, history. Those are the biggies. So teaching's not 6 hours a day. If you focus in like primary grades, 1st through 3rd, 1 to 2 hours a day of focused time, then you are doing an amazing job. And maybe for the upper grades, 4th through 6th, maybe more like 3 hours, junior high, like 4. High school could be more like 5 or 6, but they have a lot more subjects to cover, especially if they're college bound. And yes, it is possible to homeschool high school. I've done it twice, and so it is possible. We look for that in another video. So the last thing, homeschooling is not a rigid schedule. Some people, 8 o'clock in the morning is a great time to start. But some families are very different from that. I know families who would get up at 5:45 in the morning and they're starting school at 6 a.m. That is not me. That is not our household. But they really enjoy it. And they actually complete most of their schoolwork by 10 a.m. Now, most mornings, we're starting school 9:30, 10, 10:30, somewhere in that range, because that's just what works with our family. Other families, maybe they live on a farm and have lots of chores or animals to take care of, and so it actually works better to start 10:30, 11, or even start after lunch and do all of their schooling in the afternoon. If you have different, depending on activities that your child is involved with, I know that with COVID that's been a lot of change there, but if your child has morning activities, then they can homeschool in the afternoon. Or you could get all of your schooling done in the morning and have all, after lunch free to be able to participate in those activities. So homeschooling really gives you that freedom to kind of plan your day, your homeschooling day, around your family life. And a lot of people don't think of it that way. They think, oh, homeschooling, I just have to, I'm going to be homeschooling from 8 to 2 every day. And it's really not. And there's a lot of people who dread even the idea of homeschooling. They don't think about, it's like, well, how can I make it so it would be fun? If I want to get up and have my cup of coffee early before the kids get up, or get up and exercise, or go to the gym before the kids are up, you can do that. And as long as your kids sleep in and participate or cooperative with that. For me, I like to get up early and have just some quiet time for myself and do my exercise before the kids get up around 8. And then we have a nice, snuggle time in the morning that we can just talk and kind of enter the day in a more gentle manner rather than harsh alarm clocks and hurry up and you got to get up and get dressed and eat your breakfast and get out the door because, it's 6:45 and the bus is coming or we need to leave for school, and there's a lot of just harshness in a lot of families because of this try to get up and get out the door quick. And with homeschooling, you just don't have that. It's just a lot more enjoyable. It's more peaceful. And yes, there still is a routine. Yes, people still do need to get dressed and still do need to eat breakfast, but there isn't this rush like you have to get out the door. So I hope that answers some of your questions as far as what homeschooling is and what it isn't, and really what it can be, because you can make homeschooling look a lot of different ways. If you ask 100 different families, homeschooling families, how they homeschool, you are going to get 100 different answers because they all personalize it a little bit. They tailor it to meet their family's needs. Some families, you have a lot of kids. Some families, you only have one child. There are a lot of different dynamics, but you can make homeschooling work. You do you and what works best for your family. And if you work with your own family dynamics, you're going to have a much more enjoyable experience than if you try to force your homeschooling into some unrealistic model of what you should be doing. Most homeschooling families don't do it like that. We've discovered the freedom to enjoy our kids and to educate them at home without having to recreate school at home. So, hope that answers some of your questions. Check out some of my other videos as we answer questions that people have about what homeschooling is and how do we do it. If you have a specific question that you don't see answered in one of my other videos, write it in the comments section and we'll try to address that in one of the future videos. So, we'll see you next time. Bye.